A very good morning to you all. Welcome to the NDTV World Summit. And High Commissioner, Ambassador, what a great pleasure to have you in here. And we are discussing a very important topic in 2025. The world stands at a pivotal inflection point. What is not, in fact, being discussed is that power is no longer, at this moment, unipolar. There is a multipolar world increasingly, and there are diverse opinions and ideologies that are being discussed all across. The traditional positions and the anchors of the global polarity are shifting closely, and there is a leadership role of the Global South. So what we will be discussing today here at the NDTV World Summit is the new awakening and, of course, the global conflicts, even as they rage. What are the opinions of two key ambassadors positioned here in New Delhi, and what is the role that they see of India in this increasing debate around the global conflicts? And let me go across to Lindy Cameron first. Thank you very much for coming here. We've had the Middle East peace process. We've had, of course, the end of the deadly war here in Gaza. We've had, of course, thousands of people killed out there. And this began when on 7th of October 2023, there was a barbaric terror attack. Are you hopeful? You know, your Prime Minister was there at Sharm el-Sheikh, and of course, we had the peace plan. But are you hopeful that Hamas will be in control? Are you hopeful that the solution is a two-state solution with Palestine being created? Are you sure that the Hamas will not resort to the terror tactics yet again?
So I think at this point, I am just hopeful that we see peace. And I think the profound sense of relief that everybody felt when the hostages were returned this week, when Palestinians who have suffered so much saw an end to the conflict. I think that profound sense of hope and optimism is something we have to hold on to. And of course, I think huge gratitude to those who created this space, to the range of countries involved. But actually, of course, as you say, the challenge will be in the implementation. And of course, that's the challenge that we see coming ahead.
All right, the challenge would be in implementation, but from one war to the other war, Ambassador Ackermann, we've had the Russia-Ukraine war for 3.5 years now, so countless people dead. But yesterday, again, we had a conversation between Trump and Putin, and they are talking about discussions that could happen in Hungary, a meeting there. We had the Alaska summit as well, but not much came out of it. How does Germany look at the situation right now? Do you think that there is a fatigue, there is an exhaustion, and there's a desperation that there needs to be an immediate ceasefire?
Thanks, Aditya, and thanks for having me today. I think we in Germany, and I think that's valid for across Europe, look with great concern and preoccupation of what happens in Ukraine. You talk about fatigue and exhaustion. I think we had a wake-up call 2-3 weeks ago when all of a sudden Russian fighter jets entered NATO territory for 15 minutes or something, when we had drones over Scandinavian airports. All of a sudden, it's not clear whether they were Russian, but the likelihood is there. So I think Europe more and more feels under threat. So I think we don't feel the exhaustion or fatigue. We feel the desire and the urge to end this war. And you mentioned a possible meeting between President Putin and President Trump. I hope it will be more fruitful than the last one, but at the same time, I think it is very important to see that the American side has now at least alluded to being ready to deliver Tomahawks to the Ukrainian side, and that makes Russia, I think, a little nervous, and maybe that is also a sign of strength that you say, we don't accept everything. We want to, we and our allies, Pete Heck said it at the NATO Defense Ministers Council recently. We are not, standing idle. We will do something, and therefore, I think you have to have this mixture of strength, decisiveness, but also readiness for dialogue. Unlike the Middle East, I don't see cessation of hostilities. That's what it is in the Middle East. It's not a peace process yet. I hope it will be one, but it's not one yet. I hope we'll see that in Russia and Ukraine soon. I'm a little pessimistic that it happens overnight.
Even as we talk about Russia and Ukraine, there's a meeting between Zelensky and Trump that is planned in a few hours from now. But one of the concerns that has been there over the last few weeks is the increasing drones that have been spotted all across Europe, in Germany, in Denmark, and several other locations. has the warfare completely changed? Is this kind of a new challenge that you're dealing with? How does your government combat this? And are you trying to help Ukraine more in this particular direction to, completely go against the kind of drone warfare that's coming in?
Let me tell you one thing. Basically, Ukrainians are helping us now because they're pretty good when it comes to drones and drone attacks and also drone combats and fighting drones. There have been, their technology is really advanced. Ours is not, so we will learn from them. But what you rightly say is that all of a sudden we see Russian warfare. I mean, if it is Russian, I think we have to be very careful. So far, it has not been proven, but I think there is a likelihood, at least there, has crossed borders, NATO territory, and that's provocation. We have to react. And I think what you see all across Europe, including the UK, of course, we will have to, put our armed forces in a position to fight that, to deter this aggression, and therefore you'll hear that my country's defense spending is going up big time in order to put our army in a better state.
High Commissioner Cameron, we had a historic visit of the UK Prime Minister recently. I'll come to that, but staying with the defense that we are talking about, India and UK also enjoy strategic ties, and we had, of course, the UK's Carrier Strike Group that was, in fact, here in Mumbai and Goa. There was the exercise Konkan that happened, and there was also the $350 million deal that was announced recently to deliver the lightweight multi-role missiles. How significant is this defense partnership between India and UK? And I also asked this in the context of India's Operation Sindoor. How was your experience monitoring that Operation Sindoor and now building ties when it comes to defense?
So I think on the Carrier Strike Group, we were delighted that the Indian carrier and UK carrier were able to undertake quite a complex exercise off the west coast of India last week. I think really testing each other, some fantastic pictures of our aircraft flying together and indeed of the two carriers together. And I think it is a real signal that we see India as a significant power of the future. We want to see India as its best self in the future, and we want to be part of that as well in terms of our defence relationship. So the carriers are important, and of course our naval cooperation is really significant. We've had a number of conversations in the course of the last year about the importance, for example, of the maritime security in the Indian Ocean. We've seen not only the lightweight multi-role missile deal that you described, which of course I'm delighted because that's jobs in Belfast, which is where I'm from as well, and it's part of a business relationship as well as defence relationship. But we've also signed a letter of intent around the electric propulsion for ships, one of these really innovative future things which the UK has long experimented with, but I think is a really key part of India's future too. And of course, finally, we had as part of the UK delegation last week the CEO of Rolls-Royce, Tufan Agnabilievich, who was here describing the kind of wider vision for how we think UK defence and indeed aerospace and wider civilian capability and power, for example, can participate in India's future, including Made in India. So I think real opportunities, and I think for us there is a future thinking about both of our security, but there's also a future thinking about both of our prosperity. And we see huge opportunities and huge complementarity for us across those industries, for our industries to work together. And if I go back to the question you previously asked, the pace of change in defence at the moment is extraordinary. You had a previous session on AI. Technology is moving at speed, including in defence, and therefore how we see innovation in defence is no different to innovation anywhere else, which is testing, innovating, challenging, learning from each other. And I think therefore we want to partner with India as one of the great tech nations of the future as well as one of the great defence nations of the future.
Well, High Commissioner, you had a cybersecurity role and perhaps you're an authority on that subject. But let me go to the broader aspect of India-UK ties. Prime Minister Keir Starmer was recently in India, in Mumbai, and with the biggest trade delegation, 126 members out there. But there was a Bollywood twist as well. Which movie did he watch? Because people were really curious to know that he watched a movie, but which movie was it? Could you describe a little more? But also on the broader trade aspect, the business between India and UK, how are you taking that to the next level?
I have to say it was a fantastic visit. If I look a little tired, it's because there was a moment where I thought, what on the earth have I agreed to? as we received the Prime Minister, the Business Secretary, the Scottish Secretary, our Investment Minister, 126 people. And the Prime Minister joked that they had to hire a larger plane because there were so many people that wanted to come. So it was genuinely a wonderful visit, and I think Mumbai, I mean, it couldn't have hosted us better. I think there were more than, 5,000 posters around the whole of Mumbai, and they were both lit up on the sea link as well. So a genuinely warm welcome, and I think that comes to the relationship between the two prime ministers, but also between the two nations. We see this as a genuinely future-facing partnership where we see a fantastic set of existing ties. Almost 2 million people in the UK of Indian origin, that amazing living bridge. But actually, what that ought to be is a superpower for the future, where we turn that into amazing opportunities for businesses to work together. And that's what I saw happening. On the film, he went to Yash Rai Studios. He saw the trailer for The Romantics, which I have to say is now a Netflix series that's definitely on my watch list. And he heard the fantastic DDLJ theme song, basically, and met the composer of that theme song. And of course, you know how much that matters. And it's such a symbol of Bollywood cooperation with the UK. And of course, he announced that Yash Rai will make 3 new Bollywood films in the UK. That's something like 3,000 jobs. Again, it's huge. But actually, we held it in our hearts. There's a statue that's still going to go up to DDLJ somewhere in the middle of London, which I'm very much looking forward to seeing Shah Rukh Khan opening at some point.
Actually, that's what I wanted to ask, that how much is Bollywood followed out there in UK? You've been there. And also, are we looking at now film stars traveling to UK and doing films and movies out there?
Absolutely. So as I say, 3 new Bollywood films going to be filmed in the UK. I think Bollywood has always been massive in our sort of wide South Asian diaspora. I mean, absolutely huge. In fact, it's the way that many of my friends in the UK's who are of Indian origin, it's often the way how their kids learn Hindi, in fact, actually, is watching, sitting in front of Bollywood films. But what's also huge is the tourism potential. So I love the fact that so many Bollywood films have got, Scotland, Northern Ireland, amazing castles, beautiful scenery. It's the thing that inspires so many Indian tourists to come and visit the UK, and that's part of what we think is fantastic, partly because Indian tourists are so keen to see the whole of the UK. They don't just get stuck in London, they actually understand the whole country. And that then comes back into our wider relationship, because another part of what we announced last week is that we've now gone to, for an extra 2 universities, have said they'll set up campuses in India. So we're now up to 9 British universities setting up campuses in India. I think, again, that is such a massive part of the future. India needs another 30 million university places over the next decade. We are really delighted that the UK is now leading in the efforts to help provide those. And of course, again, so many people know where the universities of Liverpool or Lancaster, or Aberdeen are. And actually, again, that's part of that connection. We see that between the two populations.
Well, Ambassador Ackermann, one topic that we cannot ignore is the Trump tariffs. People are actually reading about it every day, hearing from Trump. But there's also another issue about the H-1B visas. And does Germany look at this as an opportunity for the country instead of the kind of a debate that's been raging all across? Because recently you said that an average Indian professional in Germany is earning more than an average German. Could you describe how does Germany look at this in aspects of Indian professionals working in Germany, getting more talent pool from India, but also more trade with New Delhi?
So, as you rightly say, our Indian community is not as big as Lindy's Indian community, but it is growing and growing considerably. And their average salary is way above the German average salary. That means that it is a very powerful and extremely successful group of migrants and a big diaspora with a huge impact on our economy. And that's why we, with a very liberal immigration policy, really try to convince Indians to come, study or work in Germany. Both is possible. Migration is not an easy topic in Europe right now across the continent, but I think my government is very, very clear that we need legal and fair migration to cater to the needs in our shortage of skilled labor. And that means basically not only the IT engineer, it also means nurses, caregivers, also the occasional bus driver. So we are seeing an increase in Indian visa applications for jobs in Germany, and we are very happy about that. The Indian community in Germany is popular, not least because of Bollywood. You will maybe be aware of the fact that there is a huge Bollywood festival in Stuttgart in Germany once a year, which attracts a lot of crowd, and people are very fond of Bollywood. So the soft power India has with this is very big, and people have very positive associations with Indian migrants and Indian students. 60,000 students in Germany, growing 10 to 20% a year, biggest non-German group of students. It's a huge success story, and we are planning to continue with this success story.
Well, there's another elephant in the room, and that's China. Now, I want to ask you that even as the Euro-Atlantic world grapples with China's rise, Do you see and situate India as a strategic outpost or an equal pair or a hedging partner? How do you see India as comparison to China, and how do you go ahead with it into the future?
So let me say that, when our business relation grows by the day, I have 2 German companies a week inquiring about setting up shop in India. A medium size, German Mittelstand, not the big ones. The big ones are here already, but the small ones are coming. And that has to do with China, because there is clearly a de-risking policy. So there we feel that, people feel that they should not put all their eggs in one basket. So India is a good alternative, and with this growing market of yours, with this population of yours, there is, a lot of potential is seen in India. At the same time, you should not forget, China is such an important factor, also for India, that you can't just drop it. China will be on our agenda in the future. It will be a very important factor for global business. And I must say, I'm very, impressed also by the recent opening up towards China by the Indian government, where you start discussing, you start entering a dialogue, because it's just too important a factor to neglect it. So basically, I would not say it's either or, I would say it's and, China and India rather than no.
All right, it's China and India. Would you like to take that as well?
So I was going to say, I think China is economically important for all of us, there's no doubt. But I think the challenge is to ensure that our business understand how economically important India will be in the future. I think one of the things that was fantastic about having such a big business delegation with us last week was actually that so many people suddenly understood how to imagine an India that looked as economically important as China did. And I often say to businesses that the next 20 years in India will be, if you want to imagine it, imagine the last 20 in China, and then think about how much you will need to change, how much you will need to innovate, how much you will want to be here to be part of that. So I think China is important economically, but India will be as important, and I think particularly for the global south, the extraordinary innovation in India, the ability to generate low-cost alternatives, particularly in green technology and deepen the supply chain, is something that will also change the economy of a much larger part of the world as well. And I think we need to be much more imaginative about that. But frankly, diversification is great. None of us want to be dependent on any single provider of anything, and therefore I think it's important that India is an alternative to China as well.
All right, India is an important alternative, but I want to go back and talk a little more about the Middle East plan, Ambassador Ackermann. I couldn't help but notice that the Ambassador of Palestine is actually sitting here on the front row. What would be your message to him and through him to the Palestinian government on the Gaza peace plan? Because, they've been also waiting for a peace process because they say that more than 60,000 of their people have died. On the other hand, the Israel's question is about terrorism, is about anti-Semitism that's continuing. Is there a broad-based peace plan that the Middle East peace plan has shown the path to? And do you think the all parties would agree to that? Because there are a significant amount of Muslim countries also who have shown their support for it.
So, let me start by saying how incredibly relieved we are that that killing has come to an end. I think it is the best news we have had in a long, long time. And when you scroll through social media, you see, on the one hand, the hostages from Israel coming back to their families and the incredibly moving scenes when they see their loved ones. But the same is true for the Palestinian side. When the prisoners come back and see their families, haven't seen them for years, and it's a very moving aspect. And one thinks, why can't we have that more of that rather than the killing? So I think the biggest impediments are still to be solved. There is a lot of things on our way. I hope that this momentum will last and that we'll get a process that will lead to some lasting solutions which have both sides, the Palestinian side as well as the Israeli side, in mind, and get to a compromise with which both sides can live. But first of all, we have to see what happens in Gaza proper. Who will be ruling Gaza? What happens with the disarmament of Hamas, where everybody is really very keen on having that? What happens with the reconstruction of Gaza? Who is paying for that? Who is doing this? So there are tons of questions on the table. But I say that, under the current cessation of hostilities and the agreement on stopping the war in Gaza, I think that is maybe the moment where one could sit and in a rational way discuss things. I hope that we'll come to a solution where both peoples can live in peace with each other. I think this two-state solution is an inevitable solution to this problem. It will come at a stage unavoidably, I think, and therefore we should do our utmost to get to this state.
Well, High Commissioner, there have been large-scale protests in London as well, on one side or the other, and the government has made its stand very clear. What would be your message on the Palestine question and also on the larger peace process? Because, you know, the terrorism continues, the lone wolf attacks, etc., continue. But the question really is that what would be the larger peace process that actually assures the people that they can live side by side and they can also say no to violence and terrorism in future?
So I think the suffering of everybody in this conflict has really gone to the hearts of the people in the UK, and we've seen both the awful attack in Manchester recently. We've also seen, as you say, significant sympathy for the suffering of the Palestinian people. I think all of us just want to see the violence ending and everybody being given a chance to live in peace. I'm from Northern Ireland, and so for me it's very personal that the ceasefire is the beginning of a process. It's not the end. There are many years of work to go and many challenges ahead, I think. But you have to start there because violence is not a way to resolve this. And I think there is a complex journey. There are tough decisions. There is, as the ambassador says, a huge implementation challenge, the Reconstruction challenge in Gaza, just to get back to having clean water, basic food, the aid that's needed to have people live at the most basic of lives is absolutely vital and urgent, and we have to see that moving now. That requires the ceasefire to sustain, but it also requires collaboration by both sides to make sure that that's possible. I think it's very hard. I've worked in the Middle East for a very long time. It is very hard to predict how this goes, but I am hopeful, much more hopeful than I have been for the last few years, that I think at least everybody sees that peace is in everyone's interest.
Ambassador Ackermann also spoke about the migration debate that's raging not just across Europe, but across the Western countries. There is on rise of xenophobia, and on the other hand, there is rise of also lone wolf attacks, terrorism, radicalization. How do you deal with this? Has your government come under criticism that has been seen in the past? But how do you assure your people, your own people in the UK who are protesting out there, that there needs to be an amicable solution?
So I think we believe in freedom of speech. We believe in people's right to protest, but within the law, and there are limits to that, and therefore we enforce pretty strictly sort of what's acceptable and what's not. I think that it's really important people have a public debate. These are complex issues, and it's important that people have a voice, but it's important that's respectful of everybody else as well. I think, if I may, on migration, we're incredibly lucky, as I say, to have such a massive and diverse population, and we're really proud of the UK's diversity. Diwali is always a moment. In fact, you have later today former Prime Minister Sunak coming, who lit Diwali candles on the steps of Downing Street when he was Prime Minister. I'm immensely proud of being part of a country that has that kind of diversity of leadership as well as of population. And I think it is a moment where we are proud of our diversity, but it's also important that people feel that there's a sense of an ability to make choices. India is the largest number in almost every visa category we have. We're incredibly welcoming of the extraordinary numbers of amazingly skilled businessmen, in particular, coming to the UK. I think it's a public debate that needs to continue.
Well, Ambassador Ackermann, over the last 2 to 3 years, I've visited Germany quite a few times, as you would know, and organized events in Stuttgart. But one thing that I've observed continuously is the focus towards green transition, about climate change, about the challenges that we have seen, and also the green tech. How is India and Germany collaborating in this when it comes to innovation, when it comes to newer plans, when it comes to the SDGs and the UN commitments?
It's a very good point you are making, because that is a driver of our economy, is this green transition. And in diplomacy we say never waste a crisis, and when we had to go from 50% of our energy provision from Russia to zero, we very, very heavily invested in renewables, and now 60% of our electricity comes from renewables already. And the percentage is going up, and that's a huge change, and that means also it's a huge change for business. And Germany and India have this partnership, which we call the Partnership for Green and Sustainable Development, where both governments sit together, also in working groups with the private sector, and try to figure out what to do in order to promote this. I find that extremely helpful, extremely constructive, and very innovative. So especially the Indian private sector in this question is really world class. And what we see is that more and more German businesses coming here to set up a shop in this renewables field, small ones and bigger ones, and join hands with India. And I think this partnership is really so good that we'll find a couple of very good innovations through this partnership. So I'm very confident and optimistic that this, India is an indispensable part of this climate change this debate. The transformation has to happen with India, and our experience is that with the government, but also with the private sector, this transformation can be managed and shouldered, and our experience is very good, and I think our partnerships are very valuable in that regard.
High Commissioner, I think you want to speak about the climate change, but also a secondary question to you. Ambassador spoke about it. It's about the one thing in common, that is the education sector. A lot of Indians go regularly to Germany and UK to study, but sometimes, I have to be honest, that visa becomes a problem. So is there a relaxation that is planned for the Indian students?
So if I may on climate, I think much like the ambassador, it's incredibly exciting, but it's also incredibly important here in India, because I think India's growth journey will inevitably mean an increase in energy needs, and how India meets those energy needs is probably the single most important factor in how fast the planet warms. So it is both incredibly exciting, but incredibly important to look at India's green journey, not least because the impact of climate change, the impact of the needs for adaptation here are probably more acute and more obvious than anywhere else I've ever lived. You see the flash floods in Uttarakhand, you see the impact of disproportionate monsoon rains, sort of rain in October in Delhi. I think India is a country which has both got extraordinary levels of need and capacity, but also has the ability to innovate. I always remember Amitav Kant telling me the story about how when you put together India's electric bus procurement, suddenly you automatically significantly lower the price point for electric buses, because the scale of India's needs is so big that you can shift the market, and that then again shifts the price for green technology. On education, as I said, what we're hugely excited about is the possibility of expanding UK-India education collaboration by actually expanding the campuses here in India. So there's a sort of natural limits to how big our education sector can ever get. Indian students are already right up at the top of every category, and some of the best students we have are Indian. But actually, setting up campuses here in India allows us to massively expand the number of Indian students who are able to have the experience of studying at one of our fantastic Russell Group universities, many in the top 200 in the world, who actually are also able to do so closer to home, sometimes at a lower price point, and actually able to have a choice. That I think is going to result in some extraordinary collaborations, and I can see this already on executive education, on research and innovation, and actually potentially more startups. So we see that as the way to expand really significantly rather than just incrementally.
Well, I'm told we just have about 2 or 3 minutes left. So from scripting new narratives and the new international order, I want to come to your personal lives and personal journeys here in New Delhi. Many in the audience wouldn't know, the millions of people who are watching, NDTV right now, that Ambassador Ackermann is a bird watcher. And not just that, he has studied art history and is passionate about Indian monuments as well, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. Why don't you speak a little about that? What incredible thing do you find about the Indian monuments, from Ayodhya to Nizamuddin to different areas all across to Humayun's tomb? What is so incredible about this journey that you've had in India over the last few years?
I cannot start by, telling you which and how many temples I've seen, how many palaces I've seen, but the beautiful thing about India is wherever you go, all of a sudden something pops up and you are completely fascinated by the ancient tradition, by the faith that is still lived and alive. I remember I went to Udaipur, and on the way out to Udaipur there was a big temple actually, a Klingji on the way, which is a very old, beautiful temple and full of people. And this is something that's an experience you have very rarely in life, that you come to these old monuments which are so much alive, because Hindus go and pray, and it's fantastic to see that across the subcontinent. You said, Kashmir, full of beautiful Srinagar, a wonderful city, full of wonderful monuments, Muslim monuments. You go down south, you find the same. But the bird watching, I have to say, is of course very special also. And if there are bird watchers in the audience, I would say you can go almost everywhere. But my most beautiful bird watching was in Sikkim, actually. Sikkim is paradise for bird watchers, and I will go again before I leave India. I will go again.
Well, I'm happy to inform you that my great-grandfather was the first ornithologist of Asia and a bird watcher. But, coming to you, and I couldn't help notice that Ambassador was recommending that you should visit Ladakh very soon. So what all areas are you planning to visit? But also, your interest towards Hindi. Are you actually using ChatGPT to learn Hindi? Have you learned enough on the Prime Minister's speech in Hindi as well?
So, well, you will have heard last week my Prime Minister, actually, I mean, I was slightly very impressed, actually. I think he said, what was it, Ab sabko Diwali ki shubhkamnaएं, you know. So, I mean, you know, happy Diwali to everybody. I mean, he was really keen to use Hindi, and I think it was part of the level of enthusiasm he had and that willingness to kind of make that cultural connection. So I feel frankly quite bad that I haven't got further. ChatGPT, by the way, is an amazing tool for language learning. I'm a massive fan of technology, as you said. I used to lead NCSC in the UK, and actually I've been experimenting with what you can use AI for. Language learning is definitely on the cutting edge of that. So a bit of language, but what I also love, I love books, and I have to say, India, what a place to be a book lover. I have a huge pile on my desk of books about India and written by Indians that I haven't read yet. Travel, Sikkim is very much on my list, I have to say. I think there are a whole set, I'm really keen, a whole set of the mountainous areas I haven't been to yet. I was in at the Hornbill Festival last year in Nagaland, and I mean, it was just extraordinarily beautiful. So I have a list, I have a sort of bucket list of places to go for fun, as well as the list of places to go for work. It's still pretty long because, of course, India is so massive. And then, of course, fashion. I have to say, what a place to be a fashion lover. There is just nowhere you can sit with an amazing bunch of incredible women discussing beautiful fabrics and embroidery and the incredible diversity of India's textile history. One of the things that actually my trade minister did with Minister Goyal as part of the trade deal was to go to the textile museum to see that. And I just remember the amazing photographs of them there together. So much to do.
Well, so much to do. I hope you enjoy your journey here in India, from the Himalayas to the backwaters of Kerala. What an incredible talk this has been. Thank you very much, High Commissioner Cameron and Ambassador Ackermann. And before we end this, we have a small gift for you both to request Tasha to bring in the gifts.